little job I'm doing in the polytunnel is planting up some carrot seedlings. Carrots don't like to have their roots disturbed, so we usually plant them directly into the soil. But I've been doing quite a lot of tabletop activities with different groups online, and one of them we said we'd try was to plant some carrot seeds in toilet rolls and plant the whole toilet roll. I've seen gardeners do this in community gardens and it's worked very well, so it seemed like a good opportunity to try it. Today I'm going to plant mine in there. They're still quite little, but I'm running out of space indoors on windowsills, so I'm going to have a go at planting them in the soil. And I'm also going to be sowing some carrot seeds directly as well, and we'll see the difference, and if there is a difference. I think the best way we learn in the garden is by trying out all these different things, so let's give it a go. This second batch that I'm doing is a lot smaller, so I'm not sure how they'll fare, but as I said, this is all about experimenting and trying out different methods and seeing what works. So either follow along or watch this space and see what happens. We planted a few carrot seeds in each one. The important thing when you're planting toilet rolls is to try and cover as much as the cardboard as you can, because otherwise it acts as a wick and it absorbs the moisture. So as you can see, my soil is quite stony here, also very dry. My soil outside in the actual garden is quite heavy clay, and carrots have never fared well for me outside in the clay. But they did grow amazingly well in the new raised beds last year. So I'm going to put a few carrots in here for an early crop, and then some outside for some continuous covering, but I won't be putting them outside till about April. My carrots aren't a particularly early variety, they're main crops, so they go out a little bit later. I've just topped up around here, you can see the cardboard with some compost. This is peat free, just to try and get those toilet rolls covered and get my little seedlings bedded in. Carrots are classified in two types. So there are earlies, which take around 3 to 4 months to mature, and then there are main crop carrots, which usually take around 18 to 24 weeks. The earlies are often much smaller, and you can also get round Dorcas varieties, which are great for any kind of soils. Whereas the main crops, Chantenays, Autumn Kings, would be a little bit larger. And I suppose one of the great things about growing your own from seed is that you get so many more choices and varieties. Carrots really like well-drained soil, a kind of light soil. Our soil is very heavy here, and they just struggle to swell in the heavy clay. So it's one of the reasons I like to grow some in a polytunnel. The soil needs to have been prepared a few months in advance for carrots, ideally. If they go into soil that's been freshly manured, they tend to fork. They also fork or grow into strange shapes when they hit stony soil, so we're fairly stony here, even though I do try and rake my beds, so it could be interesting to see what comes up here. Outdoors, the soil needs to be around 5 degrees minimum for carrots to germinate, but if you can get them in when it's warmer, maybe 10 degrees, then all the better. They'll germinate much faster. Try and sow your carrots relatively thinly. It's a bit tricky when they're so small. I wouldn't sow them that close together. I wouldn't sow them that far apart to begin with, because there's always losses. But just don't oversow your row, because if you do, you're then going to have to thin quite heavily. And as soon as you start thinning, you can start to attract the carrot root fly. Carrot root fly can be an awful pest for carrots. Mostly because you might not be aware that you have got carrot root fly until you pull the carrots and then find these maggoty, slimy, horrible mess of a root. One trick to spot it is that the foliage of the carrot becomes quite bronzed in colour, and the larger plants start to look weaken, so it's worth checking. When cow parsley is in flower out in the hedgerows, that's a good indicator that the carrot root flies are starting to migrate and could end up on your carrot plants. So some tricks to keep away from carrot root fly are to sow your carrot seeds early, so before mid-spring and then later on in the summer, which can avoid the worst attacks. You can also get hold of a netting, Environet, that can be placed over carrots, carrot crops, and just don't lift it really, particularly when the carrot fly might be flying. Another way is to sow thinly the foliage, the little seedling leaves, rather than pulling out the little roots as well. It also helps. Any kind of smell that you can start to waft around could encourage the carrot root fly to your carrot crop. You can also get hold of carrot root fly resistant varieties, so if you do have a problem, that's worth keeping an eye out. Once the carrots are growing, then all you really have to do is make sure they're kept weeded, so there's no competition, and don't overwater carrots. If you overwater them, they have a tendency to produce loads of leaves and not many roots, or not big roots. So just mind the watering, don't overdo it. You can sometimes see the roots splitting when heavy rain follows a dry spell. So lastly, I'm going to sow directly main crop variety in here. I'm actually putting these carrots in front of the tomatoes. It seems like there's loads of space in the polytunnel, but with all the veg I've got planned and knowing how long it takes to grow and germinate and be ready for harvest, I'm going to find myself a little bit short of space. So I've making a little line right the way along the front of, as I say, where the tomatoes will be. So this is another organic carrot, brown envelope seeds. I should mention that I pay for all of my seeds. Nobody gives me anything. Not sponsored. I really enjoy supporting these companies. And then we have the tiny little carrot seeds. So I'm trying to sow them quite thinly, and because they're tiny seeds, I'm just lightly covering them over with a thin layer, and that'll be that, and I'll get a label onto them. And I'm now going to water this whole row of my transplanted carrots and my carrot seedlings. So I better put a marker. I went to there.